In the vast world of Warhammer fantasy, one can find all types of warriors, monsters, special characters, and lords. In this video, we will explore two of the most deadly units there are, the Har Ganeth Executioners from the lands of the Dark Elves, and the Sisters of Avelorn from the lands of the High Elves. The cold-blooded killers known as the Executioners will face the peerless might of the Sisters of Avelorn in the field of battle, as they clash against each other in the magical lands of the High Elves. In northern Naggaroth, at the end of the Road of Skulls, and at the edge of the Sea of Malice, one can find the fortress city of Har Ganeth, a place where the craft of death is held in the highest esteem. It is devoted to the service of the Elven god of violence, Cain, in his aspect as the Executioner. Here, the bloody craft of murder has been polished into a fine art. The dreaded city is crowded by altars of worship to the Lord of War, Blood, and Violence. It is dominated by the towering edifice of the Great Temple. It was in Har Ganeth that the first ceremonies of execution were held. In the wake of a great victory over the High Elves, the guards of Har Ganeth led thousands of captives to the pinnacle of the temple and beheaded them with full ceremony and ritual. Such was the Dark Elves' delight when they beheld the heads tumbling down the steps that, from that day forth, executions became a regular occurrence in Har Ganeth, and the punishment by law for all manner of diverse crimes could only be one: to be beheaded at the summit of the sacrificial pyramids. Captives beyond count have been shepherded to those altars and into that temple, alongside those foolish enough to break the strict laws of the city, soon to become sacrifices to the bloody deity in whom the denizens of the city worship above all others. With a patron such as the Lord of Murder, it is no surprise that the city gave rise to the Executioners, cold, cruel, and efficient killers, the elite warriors of Har Ganeth. While other Dark Elves are known to toy with their prey or revel in the thrill of the hunt and the rush of battle, the Executioners live only for the kill, the perfect kill. The Executioners have spent hundreds of years perfecting their craft. As such, the Har Ganeth Executioners can dispatch an enemy by beheading, disemboweling, or whatever their preferred stroke might be, in a single swing of their brutal blades known as a drake. Each Executioner will refine and craft their drake into the shape and manner best suiting their preferred killing blow. As an Executioner learns his skills, he also refines his weapon, so that the two are as one. Some Executioners prefer a slender sword, others a heavy axe-like blade, depending on their own abilities and preferred method of killing. These brutal fighters take to the field of battle exclusively as melee infantry, charging against their enemies with a deep hatred before felling them with cold efficiency. First among the dreaded Har Ganeth Executioners is Tolaris Dreadbringer, chosen of Cain, famed and feared in all of Naggaroth for his vicious reputation as a cold-blooded killer. He is known to have razed a settlement to the ground, along with its inhabitants, for apparently not liking the name of the place. He has also slain fellow Executioners without flinching when their blade work is not refined or efficient enough.
We strike when and where we will, leaving no doubt who are the true masters of the seas. We make slaves of the lesser races because they are fit for nothing else. It is only just that they should strive to serve their betters. But what is truly insulting is how seldom any of them realizes the honor we do them by enslaving them. Those we take are privileged to join something far greater than if we left them to lead their pathetic little lives. To serve the Witch King Malekith is to serve the greatest ruler the world has ever known. It is a shame that the wretches cannot see that. But what can you expect of animals?
Under Tolaris' command, the Executioners have eliminated many foes and accumulated many victories across battlefields around the world, leaving a trail of destruction and terror in their wake. In Ulthuan, one can find the ancient kingdom of Avelorn. As the oldest of the elven realms of Ulthuan, it is full of magnificent places of interest, sacred relics, and many other glories. There are many places in the splendid realm of Avelorn where none are permitted to tread. Some of these places are sacred wells of great power, intrinsically linked to the rites of renewal, and so they are frequently visited by none other than the Everqueen, to help sustain Ulthuan and its inhabitants. The Everqueen is the well-respected ruler of Avelorn, only equal to the Phoenix King himself in terms of authority and power, and as such she holds tremendous faculty and prestige. The personal guardians of the Everqueen are the Maiden Guard, more commonly known as the Sisters of Avelorn, mighty warriors of both the bow and the blade. By tradition, these fearsome archer elves are among the gifted few to be personally selected from the levies to serve the Everqueen. As such, they are understandably expected to reach for the same level of perfection in all things that the Everqueen herself embodies. The ideal perfection of the Sisters of Avelorn is sought not only in mind and body or martial prowess, but in spiritual matters as well. The sisters are taught that they must rise above the petty squabbles and iniquities of the Everqueen's court, as to remain incorruptible, always pure in soul and purpose. The Sisters of Avelorn are known for their unparalleled skill as archers, and so prefer to fight their battles at range. But they are no ordinary missile infantry units. They lose not mere arrows of slender wood and steel, but blue-white shafts of purifying fire that pierces through the thickest of armor and burns away tainted flesh wherever they land. Despite being primarily a missile unit that takes care of their targets from range, the Sisters of Avelorn have no aversion to melee combat, and can hold their ground wherever the fight is fierce. Whether facing mobs of beastmen, charging knights, foul demons, or rampaging greenskins, they can stand their ground in close-quarters combat with grace and finesse, with finely wrought swords. It is known by all that the Dark Elves perceive the shattered continent of Ulthuan as theirs by right, and that nothing will cease their attempts to reclaim it as their own. It was on one such expedition that a great host of Dark Elves, including a number of Har Ganeth Executioners, bolstered by a retinue of Cold One Knights, spearmen, and a handful of highly skilled assassins, landed on the western coast of Ulthuan. Through acts of sabotage and subterfuge, they marched and advanced along the coast to the north. While the host was unimpeded for many miles, they would not be lulled into a false sense of security. Their eternal hatred of the High Elves kept them ever alert. It was not until the Dark Elves made their way into the highly magical lands known as the Steppes of Isha that they came under attack by an organized host of defenders. Scores of blue-white shafts of fire sliced through the ranks in the rear of the Dark Elves' force, not a single shot going to waste. It seemed as though they had been allowed to reach a point of no retreat before a sizable force of High Elves, headed by a group of Sisters of Avelorn, had ambushed them. The initial shock was devastating, and it claimed many lives. but it only lasted a matter of mere seconds. The ever-ready invading force were as disciplined as they come, turning almost instantly and raising their shields. And the Dark Elves immediately put up a strong defense and brought their forces forward. The Sisters of Avelorn had formed ranks in direct opposition to the hated Dark Elf foe, and used the element of surprise to take the enemy unaware. Having scoped the Dark Elves' war machine before engagement, the Sisters knew this had to be a fight that remained at range, for any chance at victory, as even their own formidable skills in melee combat would be greatly challenged by the host of Executioners. The Dark Elves, while starting the engagement on the back foot, knew exactly who they were facing, as there are few in Ulthuan who would utilize the blue-white bolts of fire that had dealt enormous damage. The Sisters of Avelorn would continue to shoot volleys of their fiery arrows upon them, until their numbers had been whittled down so far as to force a retreat. Refusing to be broken, the host of Dark Elves rushed to close the gap as quickly as possible. The Cold One riders advanced with haste. They would attempt to smash the forward line of the High Elves, and either scatter their numbers, or at the very least confine the fight to close quarters, thus buying time for the deadly Executioners to make it across the field and into the heat of melee combat. The ground was churned to mud as the Cold One Knights began their headlong charge towards the enemy lines. The Sisters immediately refocused their fire on the advancing Knights, knowing instinctively that mounted cavalry would carve through their infantry like a hot knife through butter. The charging Knights took heavy casualties during their rapid advance, but enough made it through to force the Sisters of Avelorn and the rest of the High Elf forces into a melee fight. While the Knights killed and wreaked havoc among their hated enemies, they were quickly surrounded within the High Elves' lines and brought down swiftly. It was only once the Knights had been destroyed, however, that the Sisters realized the true purpose of their charge. The Executioners had shifted seamlessly from a march to a charge, while the Sisters had been engaged with the Knights, using the opportunity created to steal ground and close the distance between them. The Sisters once more struck out at the Executioners with their fiery arrows, once again striking down vast swaths of the approaching Dark Elf host. The Sisters struck down the first few Executioners that reached their lines, but for every Executioner dispatched, the death-masked fiends cut down a score of their own battle maidens, and the tide of the Dark Elves was only swelling. The peerless Sisters of Avelorn slashed and stabbed at the Dark Elves with the grace and poise that was only to be expected from their pursuit of perfection with the blade. But their martial prowess was beginning to struggle against the grim efficiency of the Executioners' brutal assault. The Executioners would cut down the Sisters of Avelorn and their accompanying High Elf warriors in a tide of death. First making light work of their sword defense before destroying their enemies in one cold, clinical stroke, as was their craft. Their swift movements being the result of a lifetime of practice and countless executions. Soon, the forces of the High Elves were annihilated, and their remaining ranks were routed, falling back in haste, hoping only to take word of the invaders to the Everqueen. The Sisters continued to strike where they could as they retreated. The battlefield was littered with heads, quickly and cleanly struck from shoulders, and the lifeless bodies of hundreds of elves from both sides. Watching the fleeing Sisters, the Executioners, secure in their defeat, did not rest on their laurels or revel in their victory. They knew it was only a matter of time until the High Elves returned with greater numbers to once more try to push them back into the sea or destroy them entirely. But they were now deep in the lands of Ulthuan, and their blades still had much blood to spill. On this channel, we are putting together narrative Total War cinematic battles and Warhammer lore videos. A special thank you goes to our Patreon supporters who help us in the making of more content. You can also join Patreon and earn extra perks while supporting the videos to come. Find the link in the description below. Make sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching. See you on the next one.